Before we dive into today's story, if this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if this story moves you, share your thoughts in the comments and send it to a friend who needs to hear it. Now, let's begin. The garden hall of the Lakeshore Pavilion looked like it had been dipped in rose-colored paint. Soft pink balloons floated near the ceiling. Ribbons curled around crystal chairs, and tables overflowed with blush roses arranged with obsessive precision. At the center of the room stood a towering cake shaped like a vintage baby carriage, iced in pale pink and dusted with edible pearls. This baby shower was everything Serena Hale had dreamed of: luxury, attention, admiration. Serena, glowing in a silk maternity dress, sat proudly in the center, one hand resting on her pregnant belly as women circled her like planets around the sun. Near the back of the room, almost hidden behind a floral column, sat her older sister, Elena Moore. Elena wore a simple navy dress, her posture composed, her expression calm as she quietly observed the scene. Around her, women laughed loudly, squealed over tiny dresses, and argued passionately about stroller brands that cost more than used cars. Serena laughed at every compliment, basking in the moment. To anyone watching, it looked like the perfect celebration. But Elena felt like she was attending a performance where she had been cast as the silent extra, not meant to speak, only to be seen and judged. "Well, isn't this just magical?" said Aunt Lorraine, lowering herself into the empty chair beside Elena with a satisfied sigh. She adjusted her pearl necklace and glanced toward Serena with a proud smile. "A baby girl. Your mother is absolutely thrilled. She says this is the happiest she's seen Serena in years." Elena smiled politely. "I'm happy for her, too." Lorraine tilted her head, studying Elena's face a moment too long. "And you, Elena," she said, lowering her voice slightly, "have you ever thought about, well, children?" Before Elena could answer, Cousin Maribel appeared, clutching a mimosa. "Oh, Lorraine," she said quickly, "don't put Elena on the spot. You know about her situation." Lorraine frowned. "Situation?" Maribel leaned closer, whispering, but not quietly enough. "The accident 5 years ago. The doctors said she'd never be able to have children." The words landed heavily. Lorraine gasped, placing a hand over Elena's. "Oh, my dear, that's heartbreaking." Elena gently withdrew her hand. "It was difficult," she said carefully. Maribel smiled with thin sympathy. "But you've accepted it, right? Acceptance is very important." Elena nodded. "I've made peace with my life." "How brave," Lorraine said. "Not every woman could survive that kind of loss." At that moment, Helen Moore, Elena's mother, appeared behind them with a tray of pastries. "Loss?" Helen asked. Maribel smiled sweetly. "We were just talking about Elena's infertility and how strong she's been." Helen's lips pressed together, her expression softening into pity. "Yes," she said slowly. "Elena has learned to accept her limitations." The word limitations echoed unpleasantly in Elena's mind. Before she could respond, Serena tapped her glass and stood with effort, drawing everyone's attention. "Thank you all so much for coming," Serena said warmly. "This means the world to me and to Victor. We feel so blessed." Applause rippled through the room. Serena's eyes then drifted across the crowd and settled directly on Elena. "And I want to say," she continued, voice thick with emotion, "that I don't take this gift lightly. Not everyone is lucky enough to experience motherhood." Several heads turned toward Elena. Serena smiled softly. "Some women face challenges that make motherhood impossible, and my heart truly goes out to them." Elena lifted her teacup, calm and composed, refusing to react. The games began shortly after, guessing baby weights, tasting strange purees, laughing over trivia. Elena participated politely when asked, smiled on cue, and checked her watch discreetly. 2:46 p.m. Helen sat beside her again, her voice gentle but persistent. "Are you really okay, Elena?" "I'm fine," Elena replied. "This must be hard for you," Helen insisted. "Watching your younger sister have everything you can't." Elena looked at her. "I'm genuinely happy for Serena." Helen sighed. "Denial is part of grief." "I'm not grieving," Elena said evenly. Helen shook her head, sadly. "The doctors were very clear. You can't have children. Accepting that is the first step to healing." Elena didn't answer. She simply glanced at her watch again. 2:53 p.m. Maribel returned, this time with Aunt Clarice, who wasted no time sitting down. "Elena," Clarice said kindly, "have you ever considered adoption? It's not the same, of course, but it's better than nothing." Maribel nodded eagerly. "So many children need homes. Since you can't have biological kids, it could give your life purpose." Elena met their eyes calmly. "My life already has purpose." Helen frowned. "Does it?" she asked. "You're 41, Elena. Successful, yes, but you go home alone. No husband, no children, just work." Elena's voice remained steady. "My work matters." Helen leaned forward. "But it's not the same as being a mother. Motherhood completes a woman." Elena looked past her mother, watching Serena unwrap another extravagant gift. "Some women are complete in different ways." Helen shook her head. "Or they just tell themselves that to survive what they've lost." The room grew quieter. Helen's voice rose, emotions spilling out. 5 years ago, my daughter was in a terrible accident. The doctors saved her life, but not her future." All eyes turned to Elena. "She's been pretending she's okay," Helen continued tearfully, "but I know she's broken inside." Clarice murmured, "Too damaged to ever be a mother." Elena checked her watch. 2:59 p.m. 1 minute. At exactly 3 p.m., the doors to the pavilion opened. A woman in a tailored uniform entered, pushing a custom-built stroller wide enough for 3 toddlers. Inside sat 2 little girls and a boy, all with deep brown curls and bright, curious eyes. Gasps filled the room. Behind her walked a tall man in medical scrubs, confidently carrying 2 infants, one in each arm. He crossed the room directly toward Elena. "Sorry we're late, love," he said warmly, kissing her cheek. The surgery ran long. Elena stood, smiling. "How's the patient?" "Stable," he replied. "Excellent outcome." The toddlers squealed. "Mama!" Elena lifted one child effortlessly while the others reached for her. "Did you miss me?" she asked, laughing softly. The man handed her one of the babies. They were angels. The room was frozen. Helen's teacup slipped from her hands and shattered. "Elena!" Serena whispered. Elena turned calmly. "Everyone," she said gently. "I'm sorry to interrupt the shower, but the babies needed feeding." She gestured warmly. "Meet my family." Silence swallowed the room as Elena adjusted the baby in her arms with the ease of long practice, rocking gently while the toddlers clung to her legs. The man beside her smiled politely at the stunned faces around them. "I'm Dr. Julian Moore, Elena's husband," he said calmly, "Chief of Neurosurgery at Northbridge Medical Center." Several women gasped. Serena's mouth opened, then closed again. "Husband." Maribel whispered. Elena nodded. "We've been married for 4 years." Helen stared as if she were seeing a ghost. "For years." Elena smiled faintly. "Small ceremony. Private. Just how we wanted it." Julian leaned closer, kissing Elena's temple. "You look beautiful," he murmured. One of the toddlers tugged at Elena's dress. "Mama juice," he demanded. Elena laughed. "In a minute, Theo." She turned back to the room. "These are the triplets, Theo, Mira, and Sol, and our twins, Noah and Elia." Aunt Clarice sank into her chair. 5 children, she breathed. "You have 5 children?" Elena nodded. Yes. Helen's voice shook. But the accident, the doctors said, they said I might struggle, Elena corrected gently. Not that it was impossible. She looked around the room, her gaze steady. You all decided the rest without asking me. Julian pulled out his phone. If you're curious, he said mildly, everything's public. Our life isn't a secret, just private. Phones appeared everywhere as women scrolled, eyes widening at photos of weddings, newborns, vacations, laughter. Serena whispered, You were never broken. Elena met her eyes. I never was. Helen sat heavily, her face drained of color. Why didn't you tell us? She asked, her voice small. Elena took a breath. Because for years, you measured my worth against Serena's milestones. Marriage, babies, approval. I wanted a life without commentary. Serena stood slowly. You let us pity you. No, Elena replied softly. You chose to. She shifted Elliot to her other shoulder and continued. I didn't correct you because I knew you wouldn't hear me. You were more comfortable thinking I was tragic than imagining I was fulfilled. Julian spoke gently. Elena runs a global biomedical company. She's the reason half my department has better equipment. Gasps rippled again. You run a company? Helen whispered. Yes, Elena said simply. I always have. Theo toddled toward the cake. Cake, he asked hopefully. Elena crouched. Not today, sweetheart. Cupcakes at home. Theo considered this. Okay. He returned to his toys. The normalcy of it, of motherhood unfolding quietly, shifted the energy in the room. Helen's eyes filled with tears. I thought you were alone. Elena shook her head. I was never alone. I just wasn't living the life you expected. Serena wiped her face. I'm sorry, she said. I made your pain a mirror for my pride. Elena touched her arm. We all grow at different speeds. Helen approached slowly. May I hold her? She asked, nodding toward Elia. Elena hesitated, then nodded. Support her head. Helen cradled the baby and broke down completely. She's perfect, she sobbed. I missed everything. Elena watched her mother carefully. You missed it because you stopped seeing me, she said quietly. Not because I hid. Helen nodded through tears. I see you now. The shower continued awkwardly, but its purpose had shifted. Guests clustered around Elena's children instead of the gift table. Serena sat alone, staring at unopened boxes. Elena joined her. I didn't mean to take your day, Elena said gently. Serena shook her head. You didn't. I did, by making myself the standard. She looked at Elena's children. They're incredible. So will your daughter be? Elena replied. Julian appeared, holding Noah. Ready? He asked softly. Elena nodded. Helen rushed forward. Thanksgiving, she said quickly. Please, all of you. Elena considered her mother's face. Hopeful, humbled. We'll come, she said. But boundaries matter now. Helen nodded eagerly. I understand. Elena kissed her cheek. Good. They left shortly after, buckling 5 car seats into their large SUV as the sun dipped low. Julian glanced at Elena as he started the engine. That was intense. Elena exhaled. Necessary. In the rearview mirror, the children slept peacefully, unaware of the emotional earthquake they'd caused simply by existing. Julian squeezed Elena's hand. You handled that with grace. Elena smiled faintly. Grace and 5 years of patience. Her phone buzzed. A message from Serena. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry it took me this long to see you. Elena typed back. We're all learning. Another message followed, this time from Helen. I love you. All of you. Thank you for letting me see the truth. Elena stared out the window as the city lights passed. She felt lighter, not because she'd proven anything, but because she'd stopped carrying the weight of other people's assumptions. Her life was full, loud, chaotic, and real. When they reached home, Elena paused at the doorway, watching Julian carry the twins inside while the triplets argued sleepily about pajamas. This noise, this mess, this love was what completion looked like. Not perfection, not approval, not pink decorations or public praise. Elena Moore had built a life in quiet confidence, without permission, without applause. And today, finally, the truth stood on its own. She wasn't broken. She wasn't damaged. She never had been. She was a mother, a wife, a leader, a woman who chose privacy over performance and peace over validation. As she turned off the lights and followed her family upstairs, Elena felt something settle deep in her chest. Not triumph, not revenge, but peace. And that, she knew, was more powerful than pity ever could be. Thanksgiving arrived with crisp air and cautious hope. Elena stood in the doorway of her Beacon Hill townhouse, listening as laughter echoed down the hallway while the children raced toy cars across the hardwood floor. Julian was in the kitchen, calmly orchestrating chaos with the confidence of a man used to high-pressure environments. "Theo, no driving on the counter," he said without looking up. "Sol, we don't feed crackers to the dog." Elena smiled despite herself. A knock sounded. When she opened the door, Helen stood there holding a pie with both hands as if it were a peace offering. She looked smaller somehow, less certain. "Thank you for coming," Helen said softly, eyes darting toward the noise inside. "Thank you for inviting us," Elena replied. The visit unfolded slowly, carefully. Helen asked before picking up a child. She listened more than she spoke. When Elena mentioned her company's expansion, Helen didn't change the subject. She asked questions, real ones. Later, as Elena watched her mother sit on the floor building blocks with Mira, she realized something had shifted. Not perfectly, not magically, but meaningfully. Helen wasn't trying to correct or compare. She was learning. And for the first time in years, Elena felt like she wasn't being weighed, only welcomed. After dinner, as dishes clinked softly in the sink and the children napped upstairs, Helen lingered in the living room with Elena. "I spent years grieving a version of you that never existed," Helen admitted, "and I missed the real one." Elena nodded. "I needed you to see me as I was, not as a cautionary tale." Helen's voice trembled. "I'm proud of you," she said finally. "Not because of the children or the company or Julian, but because you built a life on your own terms." Elena exhaled. Tension she hadn't known she was carrying finally loosening. Julian joined them, handing Elena a mug of tea. "Everything okay?" he asked. Elena smiled. "Yes, everything is." Upstairs, a child stirred and called, "Mama?" Elena rose instinctively. Helen watched her go, eyes shining, not with pity this time, but respect. For the first time, Helen understood that strength didn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it lived quietly, raising children, building companies, choosing boundaries, and refusing to shrink for anyone's comfort. That night, after the house settled into silence, Elena stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Julian wrapped an arm around her waist. "You okay?" he asked. Elena nodded. "I think I finally am." She thought about the years of misunderstanding, the assumptions, the quiet rebuilding of self away from judgment. She thought about the children upstairs, their futures wide open, unburdened by the need to prove anything. Elena had once been labeled incomplete, broken, damaged. But labels, she had learned, only held power when accepted. She turned from the window, heading upstairs toward her family, toward the life she had chosen and protected. Tomorrow would bring meetings, responsibilities, and the beautiful exhaustion of motherhood. But tonight, Elena allowed herself one final truth. She had never needed anyone's permission to be whole. And now, at last, the people who once doubted her were learning to see what had always been there. Morning arrived quietly, wrapped in soft winter light that filtered through the tall windows of the townhouse. Elena moved through the kitchen in slippers, preparing breakfast while the coffee brewed, the familiar rhythm grounding her. Upstairs, small footsteps thudded, followed by sleepy voices arguing about who would come down first. Julian appeared behind her, loosening his robe. "They're awake," he said with a knowing smile. "I suspected as much," Elena replied. As the children gathered around the table, crumbs quickly scattered and milk nearly spilled, Elena felt a deep, steady certainty settle in her chest. This life, messy, loud, and perfect, was hers. Later that morning, her phone buzzed again. A message from Helen. "Thank you for yesterday. I'm learning." Slowly but sincerely. Elena stared at the screen for a long moment before replying. "That's all I ever wanted." She realized then that reconciliation didn't require erasing the past. It only required honesty and boundaries strong enough to protect the present. That afternoon, Elena stepped into her home office for a video call, slipping seamlessly into her role as CEO. On the screen, board members listened attentively as she outlined next quarter strategy, her voice calm and confident. When the meeting ended, she closed her laptop and leaned back, smiling faintly. Upstairs, laughter erupted. Julian was reading a story in exaggerated voices. Elena followed the sound, finding the children piled on the bed, wide-eyed and delighted. She watched quietly for a moment, realizing how many versions of herself coexisted effortlessly now. Leader, mother, wife, daughter. None of them diminished the others. She no longer needed to defend her choices or explain her happiness. The proof lived in every ordinary moment, in shared meals, in respectful silence, in love that didn't demand performance. That evening, as the house dimmed and the city lights flickered on outside, Elena tucked the last blanket around a sleeping child and stood in the hallway, listening to the gentle breathing behind each door. She thought of the woman she once was, the one her family pitied, the one they misunderstood, and felt no anger, only distance. That chapter was closed. Downstairs, Julian waited, 2 glasses of wine on the table. "To us," he said softly. Elena raised her glass. "To truth," she replied. As they sat together in comfortable silence, Elena understood something with absolute clarity. Wholeness was never granted by others. It was claimed, and she had claimed hers completely. Weeks passed, and the ripple effects of that afternoon at the baby shower continued to unfold in quiet but meaningful ways. Elena noticed the change most clearly in small moments. Helen no longer called with thinly veiled concern disguised as advice. Instead, she asked simple questions. "How are the children today? How is work going?" When Elena spoke, Helen listened without interrupting, without correcting, without redirecting the conversation back to Serena. It was unfamiliar, almost strange, but Elena welcomed it cautiously. One afternoon, while Elena worked at her desk, Helen stopped by unexpectedly, not with opinions, but with lunch. She sat at the kitchen island, watching Elena juggle emails and conference calls. "You're very good at this," Helen said quietly. Elena glanced up. "At what?" Helen gestured around. "At all of it. Balancing, leading, loving." There was no envy in her voice, no comparison, just acknowledgement. Elena realized then that respect felt very different from pity. It didn't weigh her down. It didn't shrink her. It simply stood beside her and let her breathe. Serena's baby arrived in early spring, a healthy little girl with a strong cry and curious eyes. Elena visited the hospital with Julian and the children, keeping the trip brief and calm. Serena looked exhausted but radiant, cradling her daughter carefully. "I get it now," Serena said softly as Elena stood beside her bed. "Not the superiority, the fear, the responsibility." Elena smiled gently. "It's overwhelming," she said, "and beautiful." Serena swallowed. "I'm glad my daughter will grow up knowing a woman like you." Elena squeezed her sister's hand. "She'll grow up knowing many strong women," she replied. As Elena left the room, she felt no need to compare their lives anymore. They were no longer competing stories. They were simply different chapters, written in different handwriting, both valid in their own ways. One quiet evening, Elena sat alone in the living room after the children were asleep, reviewing old photographs on her phone. She paused on one taken years ago, herself in a hospital bed, bruised, exhausted, uncertain. She remembered the fear, the silence, the assumptions others had made for her while she rebuilt herself piece by piece. She didn't delete the photo. She saved it. It was proof, not of damage, but of survival. Julian joined her, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Thinking?" he asked. "Reflecting," Elena replied. "I spent years being misunderstood, but I also spent those years becoming exactly who I wanted to be." Julian kissed her hair. "And you did it beautifully." Elena leaned into him, knowing that the hardest battles she'd fought were the quiet ones, and that she'd won them without applause. On a warm Sunday afternoon, Elena watched her children play in the park, their laughter floating freely into the air. Julian sat beside her, and Helen stood nearby, clapping as one of the triplets proudly showed off a crooked drawing. Elena felt no need to explain herself anymore, no urge to defend or reveal. Her life spoke clearly on its own. She was no longer the woman others defined through loss or limitation. She was a woman shaped by choice, resilience, and love. As the sun dipped lower, Elena closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in the present. This was her truth, not perfection, not revenge, not validation, but peace. And it was enough. Like and subscribe to my channel for more contents like this, and let us know where you are watching from under the comment section.